Marcus Chun wiped grease from his hands with an old rag that had seen better days. The space dock around him buzzed with activity as alien traders, mechanics, and ship dealers moved between the massive vessels docked in the station's bays. He had been working as a human mechanic on Nexus Station for 3 years now, and while the pay was decent, respect was something he still struggled to earn. The other mechanics often looked at him sideways. Humans were relatively new to the Galactic community, having only made first contact 15 years ago. Most species still saw them as primitive newcomers who barely understood the basics of interstellar technology. Marcus had heard the whispers countless times. Humans can barely fix their own atmospheric processors. Why would anyone trust them with real starship engines? Today felt different, though. Marcus had received an unusual message on his comm device that morning. The station's auction house was putting up a ship that nobody wanted. The vessel had been sitting in impound for months, and the fees were piling up. The original owner had abandoned it rather than pay the mounting costs, and now the station wanted it gone. Marcus made his way through the crowded corridors toward the auction house. The message had specifically mentioned that they were looking for someone willing to take the ship, as is with no guarantees. Most mechanics and dealers had already passed on it, apparently. As he walked, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this might be exactly what he had been waiting for. The auction house was a massive circular room with ships displayed on rotating platforms. Marcus approached the information desk, where a blue-skinned Alteran clerk looked up at him with obvious disinterest. "I'm here about the ship listing," Marcus said, showing his comm device. "The one that's been sitting in impound." The clerk's expression shifted to something between amusement and pity. "Ah yes, the Star Weaver. You're the human mechanic, correct?" Marcus Chun. "That's right. Well, I suppose we should show it to you, though I should warn you up front. This vessel has some serious problems." The previous owner was a Zephyrian trader who got in over his head with modifications. The ship has been deemed mechanically unsound by 3 different inspection teams. They took a transport pod to the far end of the station where the impound bays were located. As they traveled, the clerk continued his warnings. The Star Weaver is a Celestial-class long-range cruiser. Originally built by the Etherian shipyards about 20 years ago. It's got good bones, but the previous owner installed a hybrid propulsion system that nobody really understands. Mixed Etherian gravity drives with human fusion reactors, and some kind of experimental Vorthan energy coupling system. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That actually sounded fascinating rather than problematic. Different species had developed various approaches to faster-than-light travel, and most ships stuck to one system. A hybrid setup could potentially be incredibly powerful if done right, or catastrophically dangerous if done wrong. They arrived at Impound Bay 7, and Marcus got his first look at the Star Weaver. The ship was enormous, easily 300 meters long with a sleek design that spoke to Etherian craftsmanship. But even from a distance, he could see the problems. Mismatched hull plating suggested multiple repair jobs. Several external components looked like they had been jury-rigged, and there were scorch marks around what appeared to be exhaust ports. "She's been sitting here for 8 months, the clerk explained as they approached the boarding ramp. "Station engineers have declared her a potential hazard. The hybrid systems are supposedly incompatible, and there are rumors that the previous owner was involved in some kind of illegal research." Marcus walked around the ship's exterior, running his hands along the hull. Despite the obvious problems, he could feel the quality of the underlying construction. Etherian ships were built to last, and this one had clearly seen adventures. The scorch marks weren't damage. They were evidence of a propulsion system that had been pushed to its limits. What exactly did the previous owner abandon it for? Marcus asked. The clerk consulted his datapad. Jax Karath, a Zephyrian trader. He was apparently trying to create some kind of super-fast courier ship. Spent his life savings on modifications, but could never get the systems to work properly together. The ship kept having power fluctuations and near misses with system failures. Finally, after the 3rd emergency landing in 2 months, he just walked away. They climbed the boarding ramp and entered the ship's main corridor. The interior was a maze of exposed conduits, modified wall panels, and jury-rigged systems. It looked like someone had torn apart a perfectly good ship and tried to rebuild it with parts from a dozen different manufacturers. The bridge was spacious and well-designed, with panoramic windows offering a view of the star field beyond the station. But even here, Marcus could see where the original elegant Etherian control systems had been modified with human-style manual interfaces and what looked like Vorthan bioneural connections. The main problem, the clerk continued, is in the engine room. Would you like to see it? Marcus nodded eagerly. If he was going to understand this ship, he needed to see what Jax Karoth had been trying to accomplish. The engine room was a revelation. 3 completely different propulsion systems had been installed in a space designed for one. The original Etherian gravity manipulation drives were still in place, their crystalline cores glowing faintly with stored energy. Next to them, human-built fusion reactors hummed with contained power. And connecting everything was a web of Vorthan bioneural conduits that pulsed with an organic rhythm. "This is incredible," Marcus murmured, studying the connections between the systems. "Incredible is one word for it," the clerk replied dryly. "Insane is another." 3 inspection teams have looked at this setup, and all of them recommended scrapping the ship entirely. They say the systems are fundamentally incompatible. Marcus crouched next to one of the connection points where a human plasma conduit met an Etherian crystal matrix. The connection looked crude, but there was an elegance to it that suggested the builder had understood something important about energy harmonics. "What did Karoth do for a living before he bought this ship?" Marcus asked. He was an energy systems specialist, worked for the Galactic Engineering Consortium for about 15 years before going into business for himself. Actually had a pretty good reputation until he became obsessed with this project. Marcus spent the next hour crawling through access tunnels and examining the modifications. The more he saw, the more impressed he became. Jax Karoth hadn't just randomly connected incompatible systems. He had attempted to create a hybrid that would combine the best aspects of each technology. Etherian gravity drives were smooth and efficient but limited in raw power. Human fusion systems could generate enormous energy outputs, but were harder to control precisely. Vorthan bioneural networks could adapt and optimize performance in real time, but required careful calibration. If someone could make all 3 systems work together properly, the result would be a ship capable of incredible performance. Fast enough for courier work, efficient enough for long-range exploration, and smart enough to optimize itself for different mission profiles. "I want to run some diagnostics," Marcus told the clerk. "Can you give me access to the ship's main computer?" The clerk looked skeptical, but activated a portable terminal. The computer systems are about the only thing that still work properly. Karoth at least knew better than to mess with Etherian AI architecture. Marcus plugged into the ship's diagnostic network and began pulling up system reports. What he found was fascinating. The ship's AI had been trying to balance the 3 propulsion systems, but couldn't establish stable parameters. Every time it optimized for one system, the others would fall out of alignment. But Marcus could see patterns in the data that suggested solutions. The AI was treating each propulsion system as a separate entity, when they needed to be integrated as a single hybrid unit. The bioneural networks weren't being used to their full potential. They could serve as a bridge between the organic thinking patterns of the AI and the mechanical precision of the fusion reactors. "How much does the station want for this ship?" Marcus asked. The clerk laughed. "They're practically giving it away. 15,000 credits, and that's just to cover the impound fees. But I should warn you, if you take it and something goes wrong, the station won't be responsible for any accidents." 15,000 credits. Marcus had been saving for months to buy his own ship, but he had been looking at small, simple vessels. The Starweaver was worth at least 10 times that amount if it could be made to work properly. But if it couldn't be fixed, it would be nothing more than an expensive pile of scrap metal. Marcus spent another 2 hours examining the ship's systems. He tested the fusion reactors and found them in perfect condition. The Etherian drives were also functional, though their crystal matrices needed realignment. The Vorth and Bow neural networks were the most complex, but they seemed to be adapting to his presence as he worked with them. The previous owner had come close to solving the integration problem. Very close. Marcus could see where Korath had made critical mistakes in the power balancing algorithms, and he thought he knew how to fix them. But thinking and doing were very different things. If Marcus was wrong, he could end up with a ship that would explode the first time he tried to engage the hybrid drive. If he was right, he would own one of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. As he made his way back to the bridge, Marcus tried to weigh his options objectively. He had enough savings to afford the ship, but not much left over for major repairs if something went wrong. His reputation as a mechanic was solid, but not spectacular. If he failed publicly with a project this ambitious, it could damage his career. On the other hand, this was exactly the kind of opportunity he had been hoping for. A chance to prove that humans could not only understand advanced galactic technology, but improve on it. If he could make the hybrid systems work, it would establish him as one of the top mechanics in the sector. The clerk was waiting for him on the bridge, clearly expecting Marcus to walk away like everyone else had. "I'll take it," Marcus said quietly. The clerk's expression shifted to surprise, then concern. "Are you sure? I really don't think you understand what you're getting into here. This ship has defeated some of the best engineers in the galaxy." "Maybe they were approaching the problem wrong," Marcus replied. "Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to see solutions that have been there all along." The paperwork took another hour to complete. Marcus transferred his savings to the station's account and officially became the owner of the Starweaver. As he signed the final documents, he noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. This was either the best decision he had ever made or the worst. Once the transaction was complete, Marcus returned to the ship alone. He walked through the corridors that were now his, examining every detail with the eyes of an owner rather than a potential buyer. The ship felt alive around him, its systems humming with potential energy. In the engine room, Marcus began the careful process of shutting down the hybrid systems so he could work on them safely. As he moved between the different control interfaces, he started to develop a feel for how the systems wanted to work together. The Etherian gravity drives responded to harmonic frequencies, creating ripples in space-time that the ship could ride like waves. The human fusion reactors were all about raw power and precise timing, converting matter to energy with brutal efficiency. The Vorth and Bow neural networks were organic computers that could learn and adapt, but they needed to be taught how to think about the hybrid system as a unified whole. Marcus had an idea about how to bridge those different approaches, but testing it would be risky. He would need to carefully recalibrate every system and hope that his understanding of the interactions was correct. As night fell on the station, Marcus continued working in the engine room. He had sent a message to his supervisor requesting personal leave for the next several days. He didn't explain why, just that he had a personal project that required his full attention. The first step was to completely reset the bioneural networks. They had learned Koratha's flawed integration patterns, and they needed to start fresh. Marcus carefully disconnected the organic conduits and placed them in a regeneration bath that would restore them to their base state. While the bioneural networks reset, Marcus turned his attention to the fusion reactors. The human-built systems were functioning normally, but they had been configured for standard linear power output. For the hybrid system to work, they would need to generate power in harmonic pulses that could synchronize with the Etherian gravity drives. This was delicate work that required precise timing. Marcus spent hours reconfiguring the reactor control systems, creating new algorithms that would allow the fusion processes to pulse in rhythm with gravitational wave patterns. As dawn broke over the station, Marcus realized he had been working for nearly 12 hours straight. His back ached from crawling through access tunnels, and his hands were covered with cuts from sharp-edged components. But he was making real progress. The bioneural networks had completed their reset and were ready for new programming. Marcus carefully connected them to both the fusion reactors and the gravity drives, then began the slow process of teaching them to think about the hybrid system as a single entity. This was where his experience as a human might actually be an advantage. Humans were generalists by nature, comfortable with working across different technologies and thinking patterns. Most species specialized deeply in their own technology, which made them less adaptable to hybrid systems. Marcus programmed the bioneural networks with basic principles about energy harmonics and wave interference. Then, he let them begin to explore the connections between the different systems, learning through trial and error how to balance the three technologies. By the end of the second day, Marcus was exhausted but optimistic. The bioneural networks were starting to understand the relationships between the different propulsion systems. The fusion reactors were generating harmonic power pulses, and the Etherian gravity drives were responding by creating stable gravitational waves. But the real test would come when he tried to engage all three systems simultaneously. That was where Karath had failed repeatedly, and where Marcus would either prove his theory or join the list of engineers who had been defeated by the Starweaver. Marcus decided to attempt the first full system test at dawn on the third day. He wanted to be well-rested and thinking clearly when he essentially bet his life and his savings on his understanding of hybrid propulsion theory. As he prepared to leave the ship for the night, Marcus took one last walk through the corridors. The Starweaver felt different now, more alive, more responsive. The bioneural networks were learning, the fusion reactors were ready, and the gravity drives were waiting patiently for their chance to dance with forces beyond normal space-time. Tomorrow, Marcus would find out if he was a genius or a fool. But tonight, he was simply a human mechanic who owned the most interesting ship in the galaxy. Marcus arrived at the Starweaver before dawn, carrying a toolkit and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Today would determine whether his investment was brilliant or catastrophic. The ship's corridor lights automatically adjusted as he entered, and he could swear the bioneural networks recognized his presence. The engine room hummed with quiet energy as Marcus began his final pre-flight checks. Each system showed green on the diagnostic displays, but that meant nothing until they tried to work together. He had spent 3 days modifying and calibrating, but real-world testing was completely different from theoretical calculations. Marcus activated the ship's communication system and contacted station traffic control. This is the Starweaver requesting permission for short-range systems testing. The response came back immediately. Starweaver, this is Control. Are you planning to leave the docking bay? Negative, Control. Just running propulsion diagnostics while secured to the dock. Safety protocols will be observed. There was a pause before the controller responded. Understood, Starweaver. Be advised that emergency response teams have been notified of your testing schedule. Marcus grimaced. Apparently, the Starweaver's reputation for dangerous behavior had reached traffic control. He couldn't really blame them for being cautious. He settled into the pilot's chair and began the startup sequence. First, he brought the fusion reactors online, letting their steady thrum establish a baseline power rhythm. The human-built systems were reliable and predictable, generating clean energy with minimal fluctuation. Next came the Etherian gravity drives. As the crystalline matrices warmed up, Marcus could feel subtle changes in the ship's relationship with space around it. The drives didn't push the ship forward like conventional engines. Instead, they manipulated the local gravitational environment, allowing the vessel to slide through space-time with minimal resistance. The bioneural networks were already active, monitoring both systems and beginning to map their interactions. Marcus watched as organic algorithms adapted in real time, learning to predict power fluctuations and gravitational harmonics. Okay, Marcus murmured to himself, here we go. He gradually increased power to both the fusion reactors and gravity drives simultaneously. For the first few minutes, everything looked normal. Power levels remained stable. Harmonic frequencies stayed within acceptable ranges, and the bioneural networks reported successful integration. Then, the ship shuddered. Marcus immediately reduced power levels, but the shaking continued. Warning lights began flashing across the control panel as the 3 propulsion systems fell out of synchronization. This was exactly what had happened to Karath during his failed tests. But Marcus had expected this. The initial harmonic resonance was always unstable because the bioneural networks needed time to learn the proper balance points. Instead of shutting down like previous engineers had done, Marcus let the systems continue running while he fed real-time adjustments to the bioneural control matrix. The shaking grew worse before it got better. For 30 seconds, Marcus wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Then, suddenly, the vibrations smoothed out into a deep harmonic rhythm that seemed to resonate through the ship's entire structure. Marcus watched in amazement as the three propulsion systems began working together like instruments in an orchestra. The fusion reactors provided raw power in precisely timed pulses. The gravity drives shaped that energy into manipulations of space-time. And the bioneural networks conducted the entire process, making thousands of micro-adjustments per second to maintain perfect harmony. Incredible, Marcus breathed. The power output readings were unlike anything he had ever seen. The hybrid system was generating nearly 3 times the thrust of the individual systems combined, while using less energy than conventional propulsion. Marcus let the test run for 15 minutes before carefully reducing power levels and shutting down the hybrid drive. Every system showed normal status, and the bioneural networks had successfully mapped the integration parameters for future use. He was so focused on the diagnostic data that he almost missed the communication request from traffic control. Starweaver, this is control. Are you experiencing any difficulties? Our sensors detected some unusual energy signatures during your test. Marcus smiled as he responded. No difficulties, control. Systems test completed successfully. All readings nominal. Another pause. Starweaver, could you clarify the nature of your propulsion system? Our readings show energy patterns we haven't seen before. It's a hybrid configuration, control. Combines multiple drive technologies for enhanced performance. The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, the controller came back on the line. Starweaver, please report to station engineering for full systems verification before requesting departure clearance. Marcus had expected this. Any ship with unusual propulsion systems would need to be inspected before being allowed to leave the station. But he was confident that his modifications would pass a detailed engineering review. 2 hours later, Marcus found himself in Conference Room 7 with 3 station engineers, a safety inspector, and Commander Sarah Mitchell, the station's chief engineering officer. They had spent the morning crawling over every centimeter of the Starweaver, and their expressions ranged from puzzled to impressed. Mr. Chun, Commander Mitchell began, I'll be direct with you. We've never seen anything like your propulsion system. Our initial reaction was to classify it as unsafe and ground your ship permanently. Marcus felt his heart sink. But the actual performance data tells a different story. Your hybrid drive not only works, it works better than anything we've tested before. The energy efficiency is remarkable, and the safety systems appear to be extremely robust. One of the station engineers, a tall Etherian named Veltar, leaned forward. The integration of bioneural control networks with gravitational wave manipulation is elegant. I would not have thought such a combination was possible. The previous owner attempted this modification for almost 2 years, added the safety inspector, a methodical Centauran named Dr. Kess. He failed because he tried to force the systems to work together. Your approach of letting the bioneural networks learn the proper integration patterns is much more sophisticated. Commander Mitchell nodded. Which brings us to our problem. This ship is now potentially one of the fastest vessels in the sector. That kind of performance could be extremely valuable to the right buyer or extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. Marcus frowned. I don't understand. Are you saying I can't keep my own ship? Not at all. But we need to discuss some conditions for your departure clearance. Your ship represents a significant advance in propulsion technology. The wrong people would pay enormous sums to get their hands on it. The meeting continued for another hour as they worked out the details. Marcus would be allowed to keep the Starweaver, but He would need to register with the Galactic Engineering Consortium and agree to certain restrictions on who he could sell the ship to if he ever decided to part with it. More importantly, several shipping companies had already heard about the successful test and were interested in hiring Marcus for courier runs and cargo delivery. The hybrid propulsion system would allow him to complete routes in half the normal time, which could be extremely profitable. As Marcus left the meeting, he realized that his life had just changed completely. 3 days ago, he had been a station mechanic with modest savings and big dreams. Now, he owned a ship that represented a breakthrough in propulsion technology, and he had multiple job offers from major shipping companies. But first, he wanted to take the Starweaver on a real flight. Marcus spent the afternoon filing flight plans and arranging supplies for a short exploration run. He chose a route that would take him to the Kepler Nebula about 6 days away using conventional propulsion. With a hybrid drive, he estimated the trip would take less than 3 days. As evening approached, Marcus made his final preparations for departure. He had loaded enough food and water for a week, checked all safety systems twice, and programmed navigation waypoint for the journey to Kepler Nebula. The Starweaver felt different as he moved through the corridors, making his pre-flight inspection. The bioneural networks had been learning about the ship's systems continuously, and they were beginning to optimize everything from environmental controls to power distribution. Marcus had noticed that the lighting automatically adjusted to his preferences. The temperature remained exactly where he found it most comfortable, and even the synthesized food tasted better than it had when he first boarded the ship. At precisely 2,100 hours, station traffic control cleared the Starweaver for departure. Marcus sealed the airlocks, retracted the docking clamps, and gently maneuvered the ship away from Nexus Station using conventional thrusters. Once he was clear of the station's traffic patterns, Marcus engaged the hybrid propulsion system for the first time in open space. The transition was smoother than silk. One moment, the Starweaver was drifting slowly away from the station, and the next moment, it was accelerating through space with incredible grace and power. Marcus watched the speed indicators climb rapidly as the ship approached its first navigation waypoint. The hybrid drive was performing flawlessly, and the bioneural networks continued making tiny adjustments to optimize efficiency and comfort. But the real surprise came when Marcus engaged the faster-than-light systems for the jump to hyperspace. Most FTL drives required ships to accelerate slowly to transition velocity, then maintain strict course headings during the jump to avoid navigation errors. The process usually took several hours and required careful attention to maintain stable flight parameters. The Starweaver's hybrid system changed everything. Instead of laboriously accelerating to jump velocity, the gravity manipulation drives simply folded space around the ship, allowing it to step sideways in a hyperspace without the usual strain and stress. The fusion reactors provided stable power throughout the transition, while the bioneural networks managed the complex calculations needed to maintain course accuracy. Marcus found himself in hyperspace after only 20 minutes of preparation, traveling toward the Kepler Nebula at speeds that should have taken much longer to achieve. The ship's FTL velocity was nearly double what the specifications had claimed. For the next 6 hours, Marcus experimented with different flight configurations and tested the ship's capabilities. The Starweaver responded to his commands like a living creature, anticipating his needs and optimizing performance automatically. When he finally decided to get some sleep, Marcus activated the ship's autopilot and settled into the comfortable captain's quarters. The bioneural networks would monitor all systems during the night, making adjustments as needed and waking him if anything required his attention. As he lay in the darkness, listening to the ship's quiet sounds, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 3 days ago, owning any ship had seemed like a distant dream. Now, he had a vessel that was probably worth millions of credits, and he was traveling through hyperspace toward destinations he had only read about in navigation charts. The next morning, Marcus woke to find that the Star Weaver was already approaching the edge of the Kepler Nebula. The journey that should have taken 3 days in hyperspace had been completed in less than 18 hours. Marcus returned to the bridge and took manual control as the ship dropped back into normal space. The view that greeted him was breathtaking. Vast clouds of glowing gas stretched across millions of cubic kilometers, lit by the radiation from young stars being born in the nebula's depths. But Marcus's attention was immediately drawn to something else entirely. His sensors were detecting 3 ships hiding in the nebula's electromagnetic interference. Ships that were clearly trying to avoid being discovered, and that were now moving to intercept the Star Weaver. Marcus quickly ran a tactical analysis of the approaching vessels. 2 were modified cargo haulers with oversized engines and weapons mounts, while the third was a sleek fighter designed for speed and maneuverability. The configuration was classic pirate tactics: surround the target and demand surrender. Unknown vessel, cut your engines, and prepare to be boarded, came the transmission from the lead ship. This is Captain Vex of the Red Comet. You are now the property of my crew. Marcus had heard of Captain Vex. The Zephyrian pirate had a reputation for capturing valuable ships and selling them to the highest bidder. If Vex had heard about the Star Weaver's successful modifications, this encounter might not be a coincidence. Marcus activated the ship's defensive systems and opened a response channel. This is Marcus Chun aboard the Star Weaver. I suggest you reconsider your current course of action. Laughter came back over the radio. A human in a broken-down salvage ship giving me advice? Chun, I know all about your little modifications. That ship is worth more than most people see in a lifetime. Hand it over peacefully, and I might let you live. Marcus studied the tactical display as the 3 pirate ships continued their approach. They were positioned to cut off any escape route using conventional propulsion. But they had no idea what the hybrid drive was capable of. Captain Vex, Marcus replied, I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll keep my ship. Have a nice day. Marcus engaged the hybrid propulsion system and watched as the tactical display exploded into chaos. The Star Weaver accelerated away from the pirates so quickly that their targeting computers couldn't track it. Within seconds, Marcus was moving at speeds that made conventional pursuit impossible. But instead of simply fleeing, Marcus decided to give Captain Vex a demonstration of why attacking the Star Weaver was a poor decision. He looped the ship around in a wide arc, using the gravity drives to change direction without losing speed. The pirates were still trying to figure out where he had gone when the Star Weaver suddenly appeared directly behind them, moving at impossible velocity. Marcus fired a single warning shot across the lead ship's bow, then opened a communication channel. Captain Vex, I believe you wanted to discuss boarding procedures? The response came back immediately, with considerably less swagger than before. Chun, what kind of drive are you running? That acceleration profile is impossible. It's called innovation, Marcus replied. Something you might want to research before you try piracy again. Now, I suggest you return to whatever rock you crawled out from under and spread the word that the Star Weaver is off limits. Marcus didn't wait for a response. He engaged the FTL systems and disappeared into hyperspace, leaving 3 very confused pirates behind in the nebula. As the Star Weaver settled into its return course toward Nexus Station, Marcus realized that his adventure was just beginning. Word about the ship's capabilities would spread quickly through both legitimate and criminal channels. He would need to be very careful about who he trusted and where he traveled. But for the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he belonged, in the pilot seat of the most advanced ship in the galaxy, with unlimited possibilities stretching out before him like the star field beyond the bridge windows. The return journey to Nexus Station gave Marcus time to think about his future. The encounter with Captain Vex had proven that the Star Weaver's capabilities were already becoming known in dangerous circles. Word would spread quickly that a human mechanic had somehow created a ship capable of impossible performance. Marcus needed to decide whether he wanted to remain independent or align himself with one of the major shipping companies that had expressed interest. Independence meant freedom, but also isolation and risk. Corporate backing would provide security and resources, but at the cost of some control over his ship and his choices. As the Starweaver approached Nexus Station, Marcus was surprised to find a reception committee waiting for him. 3 corporate shuttles were holding position near the docking bays, and his communication system was receiving priority messages from companies across the sector. Starweaver, this is Nexus Control, came the familiar voice of the traffic controller. You're cleared for docking in Bay 12. Be advised that several corporate representatives are requesting meetings. Control, this is Chun. Any particular reason for all the attention? Word travels fast out here, Marcus. Your encounter with the Red Comet pirates has already made it into the sector news feeds. Apparently, you made quite an impression on Captain Vex. Marcus grimaced. He had hoped to keep a low profile, at least initially. But pirates had big mouths, especially when they had been embarrassed by a supposedly inferior opponent. As the Starweaver settled into its assigned docking bay, Marcus could see representatives from various companies waiting in the observation area. He recognized the uniforms of Galactic Freight Solutions, Stellar Express Shipping, and even the prestigious Eclipse Trading Consortium. Marcus took his time securing the ship's systems and gathering his thoughts before disembarking. The bioneural networks had learned enough about his preferences to automatically adjust internal climate and lighting to welcome him back when he returned. It was a small touch, but it made the Starweaver feel more like home than any place he had lived in years. The first person waiting for him at the bottom of the boarding ramp was Commander Mitchell from Station Engineering. "Welcome back, Mr. Chun," she said with a smile. "I trust your test flight went well." "Very well, thank you, though it attracted more attention than I had hoped." "Indeed. I've been fielding calls all morning from companies wanting to know if your ship is available for hire. There are also some government representatives who would like to discuss your propulsion technology." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Government representatives?" "The Galactic Engineering Consortium wants to examine your modifications for possible standardization across the fleet. And the Defense Ministry is interested in the tactical implications of your hybrid drive system." This was getting complicated quickly. Marcus had expected commercial interest, but government attention could mean bureaucracy, regulations, and possibly attempts to confiscate his ship for the greater good. "For now," Marcus said carefully, "I'd like to speak with the commercial representatives first. The government meetings can wait until I've had time to consider my options." Commander Mitchell nodded. "Understood. I've arranged for you to use conference room 3 for your meetings. The first representative is from Eclipse Trading Consortium. They specifically requested to speak with you first." An hour later, Marcus found himself sitting across from Elena Vasquez, a senior operations manager for Eclipse Trading. The consortium was one of the most prestigious shipping companies in the galaxy, handling high-value cargo and express deliveries for major corporations and governments. "Mr. Chun," Elena began, "I'll be direct with you. Eclipse is prepared to offer you an exclusive contract worth more than most mechanics see in a lifetime. We want to hire the Starweaver for critical, time-sensitive deliveries." She activated a holographic display showing a proposed contract. The numbers were staggering. Eclipse was offering to pay Marcus more per delivery than he had earned in his entire previous year, and they were guaranteeing a minimum of 1 delivery per week. The routes would primarily involve diplomatic pouches, prototype technologies, and emergency medical supplies, Elena continued. Cargo that needs to reach its destination faster than conventional shipping could deliver. "What's the catch?" Marcus asked. "Those numbers are generous enough that there must be significant risks involved." Elena's expression became more serious. "Some of the deliveries would take you through contested space or regions with pirate activity. We're specifically interested in your ship because conventional vessels are too vulnerable to interdiction. Your speed and maneuverability would allow you to avoid most threats." Marcus studied the contract details. The pay was excellent, the routes were challenging, and he would maintain ownership of his ship. But working for Eclipse would also make him a target for anyone wanting to disrupt their operations. I'd like to hear the other offers before making any decisions, Marcus said. Of course. But I should mention that Eclipse is also prepared to provide military-grade defensive upgrades for your ship, and we have insurance policies that would cover any losses. The meeting with Stellar Express was equally impressive. They offered slightly less money, but more flexibility in choosing routes, and they were interested in having Marcus explore potential new shipping lanes through previously uncharted regions. Galactic Freight Solutions took a different approach entirely. They wanted to purchase the Starweaver outright for an enormous sum, then hire Marcus as a pilot with a guaranteed position and excellent benefits. It would mean less risk, but also less independence. After 3 hours of meetings, Marcus was overwhelmed with options. Every offer was better than anything he could have imagined just a week ago, but they all required him to make choices that would shape the rest of his life. Marcus was considering his options when his personal communicator chimed with an urgent message. The sender was identified only as J. Karath, the previous owner of the Starweaver. Chun, the message read, I know what you've accomplished with my ship. We need to meet immediately. There are things about those modifications you need to understand. Things that could get you killed. Dock 7, Bay 23, 1 hour. Come alone. Marcus stared at the message, uncertain whether to take it seriously. Jax Karath had abandoned the ship because he couldn't make the modifications work. What could he possibly tell Marcus that would be more important than the offers he was currently considering? But curiosity won out over caution. Marcus made excuses to the corporate representatives and made his way to Dock 7. Bay 23 was in an older section of the station, dimly lit and poorly maintained. Marcus found Jax Karath waiting beside a small, unremarkable cargo hauler. The Zephyrian looked older than Marcus had expected, with the tired eyes of someone who had experienced significant disappointment. You actually made it work, Karath said without preamble. I heard about your encounter with Captain Vex. Acceleration curves like that should be impossible. Your basic design was sound, Marcus replied. It just needed some adjustments to the integration algorithms. Karath laughed bitterly. Adjustments? I spent 2 years and my life savings on adjustments. But that's not why I asked you here. The Zephyrian activated a privacy shield around them before continuing. The modifications I made to that ship weren't just experimental. I was working under contract for a research division that officially doesn't exist. The hybrid propulsion system was supposed to be the foundation for a new class of military vessels. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of research division? The kind that develops weapons and technologies for Shadow Wars. They paid me to push the boundaries of what was possible with propulsion technology, then planned to steal the completed design and eliminate anyone who knew how it worked. If that's true, why didn't they take the ship when you abandoned it? Because I made sure the modifications would fail if anyone tried to duplicate them without understanding the underlying principles. I thought I was protecting the technology from being misused. What I didn't expect was someone actually figuring out how to make it work properly. Karath pulled up a holographic display showing technical specifications that Marcus didn't recognize. The energy patterns your ship is now generating are setting off sensors across the sector. Every intelligence agency and military research division is going to want to examine your modifications. Are you saying I should abandon the ship? I'm saying you need to be very careful about who you trust. The contract I worked under included termination clauses that were more literal than legal. People who develop certain types of technology have a tendency to die in accidents. Marcus studied the Zephyrian's expression, trying to determine if this was paranoia or legitimate concern. If these people are so dangerous, why are you warning me? Because you accomplished something I couldn't, and you deserve to benefit from your work. But you also deserve to know what you're up against. Karath handed Marcus a data chip. Everything I learned about the people who contracted my research is on here. Organizations to avoid, individuals who can't be trusted, and some suggestions for protecting yourself. What are you going to do? Disappear. I've been running from my former employers for 8 months. It's time I found a place they can't reach. As Karath prepared to leave, Marcus called out to him. "The ship, do you regret building it?" The Zephyrian paused. "I regret trusting the wrong people. But the ship itself? No, it represents the best work I ever did. Just be smarter about it than I was." Marcus returned to the Star Weaver with his mind racing. The information on Karath's data chip painted a picture of competing intelligence agencies, corporate espionage, and advanced weapons research that operated outside normal legal frameworks. If the hybrid propulsion technology was as valuable as Karath suggested, then Marcus was sitting on a gold mine that various groups would kill to control. The corporate offers he had received might not be simple business propositions. They could be attempts by different factions to gain access to the technology. Marcus spent the evening researching the companies that had approached him, looking for connections to the organizations Karath had identified. What he found was troubling. Eclipse Trading Consortium had financial links to several defense contractors. Stellar Express was owned by a holding company with ties to intelligence services. Even Galactic Freight Solutions had contracts with organizations that didn't appear in any public databases. By midnight, Marcus had reached a difficult conclusion. Every offer he had received came with hidden agendas and dangerous connections. If he wanted to maintain control of his ship and his technology, he would need to remain independent, at least initially. But independence didn't mean isolation. Marcus began researching smaller shipping companies and independent courier services that might be willing to hire him for individual jobs without requiring exclusive contracts or detailed technical information about his ship. He also started planning defensive measures. The Star Weaver's speed and maneuverability were excellent protection against most threats, but if someone really wanted to capture the ship, they might try subterfuge rather than direct confrontation. Marcus programmed the bioneural networks with additional security protocols that would prevent unauthorized access to the ship's systems. He also created hidden backup files containing all the technical specifications for the hybrid drive, storing them in locations that only he knew about. Over the next week, Marcus carefully began taking small courier jobs from independent operators. He avoided anything that might attract attention from major corporations or government agencies, focusing instead on mundane cargo deliveries and passenger transport. The work was profitable and relatively safe, but Marcus quickly realized that word about his ship's capabilities was spreading faster than he could control. Every job led to inquiries from new potential clients, and some of those inquiries came with offers that were too generous and questions that were too specific. Marcus was delivering medical supplies to a remote mining colony when he received the message that changed everything. The sender was Dr. Sarah Chun, a researcher at the Galactic Institute for Advanced Studies, and, according to the message, his sister. Marcus, the message read, "I know we haven't spoken in years, but I need your help. My research team has developed technology that could revolutionize space exploration, but we need a ship capable of reaching the Andromeda Research Station faster than conventional vessels can travel. The journey normally takes 3 months. We need to complete it in less than 3 weeks. The fate of our project depends on it." Marcus stared at the message, wrestling with conflicting emotions. He hadn't spoken to his sister in 5 years, not since their argument about his decision to leave Earth and work in space. Sarah had thought he was wasting his talents as a mechanic when he could have pursued advanced engineering degrees. But family was family, and if Sarah's research was as important as she claimed, it might be worth the risk. The Andromeda Research Station was in the galaxy's outer rim, far from the political complications and corporate interests that were making life difficult in the core systems. More importantly, a successful mission to Andromeda would prove the Star Weaver's capabilities beyond any doubt. It would establish Marcus as the owner of the most advanced ship in the galaxy, making it much harder for anyone to steal or suppress his technology. Marcus composed a careful response to his sister's message. "Sarah, I'll consider your request, but I need complete details about your research and your reasons for urgency. Meet me at Nexus Station next week if you're serious about this mission." As Marcus programmed the navigation computer for the return journey to Nexus Station, He realized that his adventure was entering a new phase. The choice to buy the Star Weaver had been a gamble that paid off beyond his wildest dreams. Now he faced choices that would determine not just his future, but possibly the future of space exploration itself. The bioneural networks hummed quietly around him as the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus knew he had the most advanced vessel in the galaxy and the determination to use it wisely. The stars awaited, and Marcus Chan was ready to explore them on his own terms.